Warning: the following video contains explicit language which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Are you ready? Hey everybody, it's Jeff. I hope you're having a great weekend here so far. Really nice here in Maine. Sunny, windy. The winds are up, not too high, but high enough where some branches are broken and you're in the street and stuff like that. Walmart over in town here, they lost their power, so they shut down. I don't know what the hell caused that. Probably have to find out about that later, but they're always having issues over there at that place for some reason. Fires and blackouts and Christ, I don't know what the hell's going on with that store, but anyway, yeah, so that's what's going on over there. And I went over to Ruby Tuesday for a change, for something to eat this afternoon. And I ordered their catfish, fried catfish with shrimp and chicken fingers. And that plate was $28, okay? And I had a salad bar with it, okay? So that pushed it up higher, but anyway, it was, I usually like to eat Cajun food and stuff like that, but boy, the catfish was so dry, and the shrimp was way over seasoned, okay, and the chicken nuggets, I felt like I was biting into bone instead of meat. The chicken fingers rather, but the fries were like, they tasted like they've been sitting around for a while. They weren't warm, they were kind of cold. And when I went in there in that restaurant, I must have stood in the fucking lobby there for about 15-20 minutes while just one or two people were working the floor. And there was quite a few people in there today, and from what I could see, there was only one waitress and one person to seat people as they came in. So the wait time in there was ridiculously long, and it's like, Jesus Christ. I mean, I understand it's a Saturday, but, because it's a Saturday and there's going to be more business, then get more people on shift then. No, it seems like everybody took the day off or something, and, they only had two people. So I'm sitting there waiting for like 20 minutes for my drinks to get to my table. Then I had to wait, for the food. I went through 2 plates of salad bar before they finally brought the goddamn food out. And when I got it, that's the condition it was in when I got it. I'm like, Jesus. So, I was really not that impressed with Ruby Tuesday, and I was trying to do something different, because I eat a lot at Applebee's and other places, but, Ruby Tuesday used to be in Bangor, but it closed a long time back. It was in the mall, and it shut down, and now there's only one, and it's in Brewer. So, yeah, I went over there and was like, wasn't too thrilled with it, with the food I got, and I really wanted to have some good catfish, for Christ's sake, but nope. So, anyway, there was a gathering of doctors in Washington, D.C. here recently. And the topic of conversation, believe it or not, was about Donald Trump. Okay. And it was about, his mental and physical health, and how, even though Trump's doctors are not releasing any information, really to the public about how he is, those doctors that were giving their conference were talking about the signs that they'd seen of Trump, and how they can sort of diagnose a little bit what he's got, and the list is long for mental conditions that he's suffering with, as well as physical, because they're noticing that he seems less energetic, more tired. And yeah, I mean, I understand, if you're in a campaign for the president, that can wear you out, right? That can really wear you out. So that would affect anybody. But at his age, he's he's going to be 79, when a couple of 2-3 months or whatever. At his age, if he wins the president, he'd be the oldest president, we've ever had in office. And they don't think that he could make a 4-year term in the condition he's, because they say the older you get, the quicker the symptoms you have that are going to lead to the ultimate problem. Okay, so in a couple of years he might deteriorate so fast that he might not be able to finish the last 2 or 1 year left in his term. And that is a concern, because some of these doctors that we're talking were members of the military, and so it's a issue that really people should be discussing. But I think, well, yeah, we should have discussed this way back when, but right now we're like less than a month outside of a goddamn election, and now we're sitting here talking about his health and whether or not he ought to be president. It's too late for that now. You think MAGA's going to pull him out of the race now? They certainly don't want to see J.D. Vance running, because they know that half of MAGA will just cut and run on him. So they're into this to the bitter end. And I'm thinking, you guys, you should have been out there hitting the pavement for months and months way before. Like in January, you guys should have been making these arguments. But anyway, I grabbed a piece of the report that's from Midas Touch. I didn't record the whole thing because it was like an hour. And so I took about 15 to 18 minutes of it and tried to compress it down into, just some, good points or something like that. So I'm gonna swing you over to this video, watch what I've given you, and then we'll go to a commercial break and we'll go to the next topic. Okay, so let's do that.
Whilst Donald Trump was doing this,
got no muscle. We need a little muscle. Then they bring in another one, but he's got a weak face. He looks weak. No, these guys have the whole package.
a group of mental health professionals were doing this.
He meets criteria for narcissistic personality disorder, which is kind of obvious, meets criteria, diagnostic criteria for the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Manual for Antisocial Personality Disorder, meets criteria for psychopathic personality disorder, which is a little bit different from antisocial, gets more at the things like the lack of remorse and the internal psychological traits that are involved, meets criteria for paranoid personality disorder. And that's not even getting into the delusional disorders that a couple of people mentioned, including grandiose and paranoid delusion.
Yes, on Friday, September 27, an expert group of 18 non-partisan experts representing psychiatry, law, political science, economics, history, journalism, climate, and nuclear science gathered at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. for a conference entitled The More Dangerous State of the World and the Need for Fit Leadership, subtitled The Much More Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. This is the second time the group has met to share their concerns. The first was just ahead of the 2020 election. Their analysis of the dangers of a future Trump presidency was terrifying. The takeaway is that this is not a drill. It's a national emergency. There is consensus that Trump is a threat not only to democracy, but also a national security threat to the world. Again, this is not a political position. It's a medical one. But the event itself and the findings of its panel and their analysis of the threat has been censored by the corporate media. Ask yourself why not a single news organization has covered this important conference or its recommendations. Donald Trump turned the world upside down. The conflict we see not just politically across the United States, but in Ukraine and Gaza, Iran and Lebanon, can be attributed to his presidency. We can see that legal methods have failed to stop him, political approaches have failed, and military means have not been able to prevent the dangerousness of Donald Trump. Left unchecked, Trump continues to run his mouth, knocking the world off its axis. This is the first of 2 videos bringing you highlights of the World Mental Health Coalition's conference and its findings, starting with General and Dr. Stephen Xenakis, retired Brigadier General and Medical Corps Officer of the United States Army.
Our work as military physicians, we were called on frequently. It was fundamental to our practice that we would do evaluations for fitness for duty. We had to respond to a request of our leaders to say, should this person be cleared here, have a security clearance? Can this person be put back into the cockpit? Should this surgeon go into the OR? We have what we call the nuclear assurity program. Should this person have access to nuclear weapons? Now, that was the call of the leader. That was the decision of the commander to decide who was going to be assigned where, what their responsibilities were, and what authority they were going to have. Our position, my position as a physician, was to evaluate, to advise that leader about what I knew about that person's health and their mental health, and to see if there was if there was a problem in the way that that person was currently experiencing that may interfere with executing those duties. And you heard a very elegant statement from Admiral Smith about what it takes to have a senior leader. The interesting problem that we have is that that our Congress has been AWOL on taking the one step that they could take to best decide, at least start to explore what those criteria could be for what a president should, in fact, show and demonstrate to be effective. And that because they have not taken on being able to further specify and define Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. Paul Summergrad, a former president of the APA, and I wrote about this in 2018. We said very clearly that this was something that was extremely important as we looked out. I mean, we've had a number of presidents that have really already, we know, have had health problems. It doesn't take a lot of imagination, really, to say, at what point in time are we going to have an individual as commander-in-chief who has some problem that clearly is impairing their capacity to function? And who is going to be able to discern that? Well, of course, it's the immediate advisors. It's the people around that leader who say, he doesn't track. He doesn't understand what's going on. He's not inquisitive. Frankly, as it was with the case that people felt about Richard Nixon, he doesn't show the character. He doesn't have the temperament. He doesn't have the integrity. Those people need to speak up. And when they speak up, that goes to the Congress, and the Congress goes through the process of the 25th Amendment. Well, we have a completely dysfunctional AWOL Congress. So where does the power lie then? Who do we as military physicians have to speak to? As you've heard, truth to power. That's our role. My job, many, many times as an Army doctor, was to say what nobody else wanted to hear. To go in and say, this person can't do his job. This is going to be dangerous. We've got to do something. Well, Steve, if I say this person's got a mental health problem, that's stigmatizing. You've got to tell me more. And that was my job. And by the way, that's different to say about fitness to duty than, in fact, what many of my colleagues feel, that we circle around diagnosis. It's not about that. It's really about, does this person have the skill sets? They're like an artist or an athlete. Do they have the capabilities to do the job that they're being asked to do? I believe we need to be able to make sure that we state that clearly to our public, because the people who need to understand that, if our country's going to go in the right direction, if we're going to be able to save our country, are those young people sitting on the couch who may not want to vote, who have decided to abdicate their roles and in my view, their responsibilities as citizens, or the swing voters. This is something that most people is beyond their usual scope of their work and their daily lives, because most of us function in a very clear way. We know what's best for us. We're now saying, no, this is broader. So we have the issue of fitness for duty, and I think it is different than a diagnosis. I think it's also different than what many of my colleagues do is a forensic evaluation. You've seen that. You've probably seen it on television. Is this person insane? Are they competent? Those are different evaluations, and I've done a lot of those over the many years. This is specifically about, can this person do his job? Now, the second is dangerousness. How do we see the issue of dangerousness? Which we also have to make a judgment about, and to tell and explain that this person that we know that we're going to elect, we have a reasonable suspicion and maybe conviction that this person is dangerous. The interesting thing that we have is there was a circle around President Trump, who at times will come and speak and tell the stories about what it was like working with him, about how fit he was and how capable he was in that position. And the particular one that stands out is a book by John Bolton, so The Room Where It Happened, his White House memoir. And he talks about he says that the president has systematically governed with single-minded instinct for looking at issues entirely through the prism of what is good for him and not what is good for the country. And others advisors have said the same thing, but I think they've made a fatal error, at least one. How hard it is to work with such extreme characters, with such autocrats, with such despots, because these people, unfortunately, have a kind of genius about what they do. They cannot be controlled. They can't be managed or outmaneuvered, and he was not. So any game played on their field gives them an advantage. This is really worrisome. And the science of psychology, the science of mental health tells us what the character is like of autocrats and despots and how they succeed. That we know, and that we can talk about, and that is what we should be educating folks about. We know that these people see the world through their outsized lens. We know that they feel no restraints in terms of exercising power. We know that they are willing to hurt someone else. They're complete, almost impersonal. Everyone is an object. Everyone is there to be used. We know that. And so we are obligated to say it, to explain it, and that it is dangerous. What's the maximum? See something, say something. And that's what I think is what we're obligated to do going forward. There's one more factor here that we have to take into account. And this is a time to maybe hoist on the man on his own petard. Donald Trump, if elected, and however messy this election would likely be, is going to be 78 years and 220 days old, the oldest person to ever be inaugurated in the office. We've already seen plenty signs of cognitive decline. We know how this plays out. Any one of us who have taken care of family or been around others and watched that process, we know what that mentality is like. We've listened to him. We've had people say that this is not one of the people who presented, played him for debate preparation in 2016 and 2020. This is not the same person who I was studying to prepare for the debates. The rambling, the looseness, the failure to grasp details, the failure to be able to talk through issues. This is not the same person. So it is completely expectable that we will see a serious decline if this man is elected to the 4 years of his office. That should worry everybody. That should worry us all. And it needs to be said. I mean, it was clearly the story, and it ended up with President Biden deciding not to run anymore. There's a lesson learned from that. And we need to take that lesson and make sure that that's also communicated. So with my fellow military officers and senior leaders, and all of you, I mean, we share our pledge. As officers, we take the oath to the Constitution to defend the country. This is what we think is right. It is our country and what we put it as a priority. And I think it is up to us to speak truth to power. The power rests with the American people, and to give them the knowledge and the tools so that they feel that they can independently and effectively make the right decision. And that's what we're here to do. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak up about it.
So that's the video. Pretty interesting points and concerns about Trump. I picked that particular speaker because I thought, he kind of nailed it pretty well. There was other doctors in that same video that spoke, but I think they all kind of had variations on a theme, if you will. So it's just, I thought he kind of really gave out the clarity of it, of the points. And so that was the one I kept on there on the video for people to see and hear. And so, yeah, it should be a real concern to MAGA, but it's not. It is a concern to everybody else who is going to be voting. And I think when we go to the voting booth this November, that should be on our minds about, Trump is not physically or mentally capable of doing this again for 4 more years, okay? He's been out of the White House for, 4 years now. And so, in that time, that would have been his second term if he had won it, and right now would be the point where he would just be retired from the White House, and but now he's coming into it when he's really not really physically able to do another term. So it's really almost an imperative now that we have Kamala in there as president, because she really needs to be the one to take us forward here. She's young enough, she's healthy enough, and like I said, her ideas compared to his are much better, and she's not following some hidden agenda from like the Heritage Foundation or something where they're gonna come down on all of us like fucking dictators, okay? So anyway, let's go to a commercial break and we'll be right back.
This is me.
This is me.
This is me!
This is me.
I'm Alex Curtis. I'm a lobsterman in Maine, and this is me.
I'm Ruth McLaughlin, and this is me.
I'm Eric Hopkins.
I'm an artist, and this is me.
This is me.
Me.
This is me.
This is me.
This is me.
At the end of the journey, the main thing is you, original.
It's never the Republicans who ever bring up race.
Is she Indian or is she black? She was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
This woman, this disaster whose only qualification was having a vagina and the right skin color.
Either Kamala Harris, she's the original Haktua girl.
She's never earned or won anything.
Pimp's trying to find a woman that's weak. You know what I mean, man? Jive turkey?
That's not how I remember Kamala Harris speaking. That sounded a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more jive to me.
Kamala Harris is a JV player. She is a DEI pick.
She was a DEI hire.
The DEI vice president.
She would be the queen of DEI if she were elected.
Affirmative action. You're selected because the melanin in the content of your skin.
Is it possible that she's getting whiter?
Whiter?
Yeah.
I think they've been.
Have you seen her lately? Like, it is weird. It's like she's like a biracial werewolf. Just.
I've noticed she started wearing.
Straightening.
She's a DEI hire, right? She's a woman. She's colored, therefore she's got to be good.
So racist.
Generation dreams about what everybody dreams about: starting a family, owning a home, building a life with stability, and having hard work pay off. People ask why we're not married, why we're not having kids, why we don't own a home. It's because no matter how hard we work, big banks, big tech, big insurance companies find a way to screw us. They raise their prices and get bailed out when they screw up. We're not asking for a handout or a bailout. We just want the chance to make it. Have someone in our corner who fights for us. Someone who gives a damn, who'll take on the people gouging us and win. And that someone is Kamala Harris.
I will fight to give money back to working and middle-class Americans.
In this election, we're not just choosing a candidate. We're choosing a future.
In 2020, they met in a historic debate.
Please welcome California Senator Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence.
For 90 minutes, they disagreed on many issues.
The American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts. 210,000 dead people in our country in just the last several months.
Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, I'm sorry.
It's fine, I'm Kamala.
They debated issues from COVID to foreign policy, reproductive rights to the economy. But today, for the first time in history, the two participants of a vice presidential debate agree on one basic fact.
I cannot, in good conscience, endorse Donald Trump in this campaign.
Mike Pence joins another Republican vice president, Dick Cheney, in saying he cannot support Donald Trump. It's more than policy or ideology. Donald Trump is a bad man who tried to end American democracy. His own vice president knows it. It's time to put country first. America or Trump.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. and some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it. Write for Pollution Booklet, Box 1771, Radio City Station, New York.
Be a part of the entertainment value of a lifetime.
I loved it.
It was the best performance I've seen in a lifetime.
I loved the show. I liked it very much. He's a very entertaining man. It's well worth the money.
Now appearing in Charlottetown, coming to Halifax November 6th to the 18th, and St. John November 20th through the 26th.
Everybody, welcome back. All right, so the next video that I have here is about 13 and a half minutes long. It's a video made by Maya May, and she talks about our climate and what our world is going to look like if the average world global temperature is risen up 4 degrees rather. And what kind of an impact that's going to have on coastal communities and stuff like that. So let's go to that video. We'll watch that, and then I'll have a few things to say about that after it's done. So let's go to the video.
Last time we had the same level of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, our oceans looked very different. But how different? I asked one of the leading experts on the subject, and what I learned was pretty shocking. The sea level was a lot higher then compared to today. That's because it takes a long time for sea levels to adjust as Earth's temperatures change. As the planet warms, all that new heat energy slowly melts ice caps and glaciers, and eventually, once the Earth stops warming, the oceans find equilibrium at a new level. So if we stopped emitting carbon dioxide today, how much higher would our sea levels rise? Well, we have a pretty good idea of what things looked like thousands of years ago when atmospheric CO2 levels matched ours today. In this episode, we're going to use some amazing new imagery to simulate what places we know and care about would look like in a few different warming scenarios in our lifetime and just beyond. It turns out we don't have to project far into the future to start seeing major impacts on our coastal regions, and that will impact millions of people. Carbon dioxide levels are currently rising faster than at any time since the last ice age. I know that because I went and held 50,000-year-old ice from Antarctica that has tiny bubbles of ancient atmosphere trapped inside of it. Scientists use those bubbles to compare our current atmospheric carbon to the distant past. I was holding that ice while filming a very exciting broadcast season called Weathered Earth's Extremes, which you can stream right now. Scientists at Oregon State University found that we're currently emitting CO2 10 times faster than at any time in the last 100,000 years. If you want to learn what that discovery means for our weather today and see more of Weathered on location around the world, head over to the PBS streaming app where you can watch all 6 episodes right now. And to learn more about sea level, stay right here. Coastal communities are already feeling the impacts of sea level rise, but so far, what we've experienced is tiny compared to what we'll see in the future because the rate of rise is speeding up. In the last 30 years, we've had about 4 inches of rise, but we're projected to see a foot in the next 30. There are a lot of unknowns when it comes to sea level rise, but paleoclimate records show the potential for a startling future.
125,000 years ago and 3 million years ago were some last high stands of sea level that are comparable to when temperatures and carbon dioxide levels were about the same as they are now. And back then, we know that sea levels were 5 meters, maybe 10 meters higher than they are today. So we still probably have a lot of melt left to occur.
Here's what 10 meters of sea level rise will look like in the US, according to the data model visualization tools created by Climate Central and powered by NOAA data. If or maybe when that happens, much of New York, Long Island, and Newark would be underwater. The White House would become waterfront property, along with all of Norfolk, Virginia, Savannah, Georgia, and so many more. But the most impressive change is southern Florida, where major coastal cities would be submerged. In southern Florida alone, more than 10 million people will become displaced. Even in mountainous states like California, much of San Francisco, and even Sacramento would be covered. Worldwide, around 1 billion people, or about 1/8 of the world's population, live less than 10 meters above current high tide lines. Most of the country of Bangladesh would be underwater. All of Bangkok, Shanghai, and most of Hanoi would be covered, as well as much of Singapore, Buenos Aires, and of course, nearly all of the Gulf Coast. Without a meaningful reduction in Earth's average temperature, this is very likely to play out eventually, and that's just at current CO2 levels. As we continue to emit greenhouse gases, the projections rise even higher, but it'll take centuries for sea levels to catch up with current temperature. But what exactly is causing sea level rise?
The dominant signals causing global sea levels to rise are about 2 parts land-based ice melt, Antarctica, Greenland, mountain glaciers, and about 1 part thermal expansion. So roughly 2 to 1.
When water warms, it takes up more space. And there's so much water getting warmer in our oceans that thermal expansion used to be equal to ice melt, but that's changed.
The ice sheets are really starting to lose mass, and that the rate of which they are losing mass is accelerating, and that's overtaken the thermal expansion part. And that's the real elephant in the room, is how much are these ice sheets going to melt, and what will that look like at the end of the century?
Projections for the next 30 years are more dependable than looking further into the future. So we'll start at 2050. Over the last 100 years, oceans have risen about 1 foot, but that rate of change is increasing.
So history will repeat itself and fast forward. We're set for 1 foot of sea level rise in the next 30 years relative to 2020.
1 foot may not sound like a lot compared to 10 meters or 30 feet, but low-lying coastal communities around the world will absolutely feel the impacts. And that 1 foot of additional water pushes floods higher as well. So on our US map, we're adding the ground covered by a 10-year or 10% chance flood to our map, meaning the likelihood of this flood happening this year is 1 in 10. Many low-lying coastal communities have levees and seawalls, but on our maps, we're showing areas that are potentially protected as flooded to give a sense of the risk. But what will these sea levels look like on the ground? Enter Climate Central. They're undertaking an ambitious project driving the east and Gulf coasts of the US, collecting images and elevation data to create realistic scientific-based flood model visualizations. We talked to Max, who is out collecting data for this project.
Right now, I'm in beautiful Daytona Beach. Just woke up. This is Climate Central's Edge of America Flood Rover 2. The vehicle, it's a fully electric Ford F-150 Lightning. Up on top, we have mounted on both sides 2 cinema cameras. And in between those 2 cinema cameras is the silver cylinder. This was a LiDAR unit, which sprays basically a laser cloud, similar to what they use in augmented reality. And then the other 2 units up there are GPS units.
With that data, they can create scientifically accurate images of future sea level.
Our interface allows us to zoom in on a particular city or town or road, like Charleston. So what you're seeing is just based on 3 feet of ground level water. This is what the downtown Charleston market might look like with 3 feet of water.
We'll look at our most likely warming and sea level rise scenarios in a bit, but first, we're gonna look at 4 to 5 degrees of warming, and it's not the most likely path, but if renewable energy transition takes longer than we currently project, it is possible.
If we start talking about 4, 5 degrees C, we're talking perhaps more certainty in saying, yes, we're going to hit 3, possibly 4 feet, even more.
4 feet would put large parts of the East Coast underwater, and populous global cities like Shanghai and Bangkok would no longer exist the way we know them today. But there are a lot more unknowns the further out we project, and by 2100, melt could speed up. The potential collapse of large ice sheets could be a major catalyst for faster melt.
What will be some of the triggers that might create some collapsing, some rapid discharge? These processes aren't very well modeled. They're not very well observed. Is it plausible by 2100 for global sea levels to rise 2 meters? And what would that look like along the United States? Well, that 2 meters would actually look like 2.2 meters. So that would really be like 7 feet, 8 feet. Now that's a very low likelihood. But what if these glaciers really start becoming unhinged? These ice sheets really start to melt.
2.2 meters of rise along the East Coast would be devastating. In Florida, popular cities like Miami and Cape Coral would be flooded. Cities along the East Coast would be completely changed, from Savannah, Georgia, Charleston, South Carolina, and all the way to Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. As we model out to 2150, there are even more uncertainties.
If some of these known unknowns start kicking in at higher temperatures, 4 to 5 degrees C, the numbers just become a bit scary, right? We're talking about upwards of 4 meters of sea level rise, 12, 13 feet. Very unlikely, but we can't take it off the table.
But for now, some good news. Our most likely emissions and warming path shows very significant cuts in greenhouse gas emissions by 2100, hitting somewhere around 3 degrees, hopefully just under.
On the trajectory that we are on, let's say 2.5, 3 degrees C rise by the end of the century, we're looking at somewhere about probably 3 feet of rise on average along the United States coastline.
And that extra foot is meaningful compared to the 4 or 5 degree warming scenario with 4 feet of rise. And by 2150, well, it's important to understand that we're not currently on track to fully stop warming by 2100. The more we warm in that extra 50 years, the faster seas will rise.
The coastal environment is going to look very different regardless of what we do. We're on a trajectory now of 6 to 7 feet by 2150 under the commitments at hand. It could be a lot larger, probably not going to be too much smaller.
So by 2150, our grandchildren and great-grandchildren are very likely to witness the evacuation of large parts of New York City, most of Miami, and the already below sea level city of New Orleans, plus dozens of smaller towns and coastal communities, just to name a few. And that's in a relatively optimistic scenario. I want to talk about Louisiana for a second. Much of the area is already below sea level. There are over 3,000 miles of levees protecting large parts of the area, including New Orleans. So will all cities just build walls instead of relocating as our seas rise? Probably not, but it's hard to say. Levees are only protective up to a certain point, and as seas get higher, the risk of failure becomes catastrophic. We have already seen government relocation projects for communities in Louisiana where the government pays to move an entire community, often because it's cheaper than extending a levee or constant rebuilding. Isle de Jean Charles is a community we visited while producing Weathered Earth's Extremes. It was relocated after it was excluded from a levee project, but the choice to leave was still incredibly difficult. And even with effective levees, eventually communities will be living in a very risky fishbowl.
The Texas spine, this idea of big gates in Boston and New York City, that's not going to combat sea level rise, I'm sorry to say.
But we have the technology to reach net zero. And that's the point when we have reduced human greenhouse gas emissions to a point so low that we can capture the rest and put that carbon in long-term storage. And we can reach that point far earlier than 2150. If we really move quickly and support the energy transition, we could reach net zero well before 2100. That will mean a lot more support for speeding up the transition to low carbon energy like solar, wind, batteries, electric vehicles, and even our food systems. To learn more about the transition and the impacts of warming right now, check out our new broadcast series, Weathered Earth's Extremes, on the PBS app. Is your home covered by water on any of these maps? If so, What's your plan? Let us know in the comments, and see you next time on Weathered.
Pretty scary stuff, you know what I'm, and I have to think that a lot of those areas that she was pointing out that will be essentially underwater will probably be abandoned long before that, because the hurricanes that will be going through those areas will just force people the hell out of there. So Miami and some of these other cities along the East Coast, they'll probably be ghost towns by the time those places are underwater anyway. And I can't imagine in Washington, D.C. having the White House actually sitting on a beach, okay, because the water will be slapping the the goddamn door. But that's what it looks. I mean, because it does sit right level practically with the fucking water, the ocean water. So they would probably end up having to relocate a capital further inland somewhere and abandon Washington, D.C. You know, I could see that happening by the end of the century. Hopefully, before they do that, they'll try to salvage as much of, because that area is as much of a museum piece as any place else. You know, you got a lot down there. Statues and monuments and the wall with names of people from, died in Vietnam. You have all that stuff there that's going to be at risk of being, submerged or ruined because of the encroaching ocean waters. I mean, even around here, things, the water could get really high enough to even, become a problem right here where I'm at in VZ, for Christ's sake, because I'm right on the river. The river goes right into the ocean, so I'm pretty close to the ocean. Yeah, I mean, that's the way it is. And the thing of it is that, back in, and I remember, was it, I don't think it was Donahue, but it was one of those shows that comes on near the talk shows or something like that. And during the 80s, it started, a lot of these people all over the place who were making talk shows. One of these damn talk shows, they had some scientists on there who was talking about, how the Earth is going to look different, because of, global warming or whatever, and they said that they've been telling people, if you're going to buy a home, like on the coast or something near the ocean, to make sure you're like 50 feet away from the water, okay? When you count, because it allows for, like when you have hurricanes and stuff like that, so that way, you're safer. Well, since then, they've more than 5 or 6 times that distance from the ocean, because the hurricanes are stronger now than they predicted back in the 80s. And the ice is melting faster than they predicted back in the 80s, because it's a cumulative effect. The warmer it gets, the quicker the ice melts, which, eventually, you get more methane put in the air and carbon from us and do what we're doing, and that increases the heat level again, which increases the speed of the ice melting. So it's actually going quicker than they estimated all those years back, okay? And the thing is that people today who are out buying property around those areas, along Florida's coast and the Gulf and, the East Coast, a lot of these people probably will lose their property to, Mother Nature way before they get a chance to pay their mortgage off, which most people get, 30-year mortgages and stuff like that. In 30 years, those areas that they purchase today are probably going to be washed out, and it's like, hey, don't do it. Don't fucking do it. Don't buy any fucking beachfront property down there, because it's not going to last. You'll outlive it, okay, and you'll lose your home and everything. So don't go down there and do that shit, And you saw how much of Florida will just be gone, in decades to come. I mean, that's going way the hell up inland there. You know, Florida is just going to be, you know, is like Rhode Island today, and that'll be just about as much of Florida that'll be left, you know, in the decades to come. So there's really, you know, no point at all in anyone moving to that area to live there, you know. It's sad, but because, you know, Miami's a big city, you know, and you know, then you got Disneyland, you got all those big happy places down there. That's all going to be gone. All that shit's going to be gone in time to come. They'll have to close Disney down, Busch Gardens, Six Flags, whatever the hell else, you know, SeaWorld, all that stuff's going to have to go. You know, they'll have to close all that shit down because, you know, the water, the ocean, and the hurricanes, it's just going to be too expensive to keep that stuff going and constantly repairing it all the time every year. And I'm sure that I'll live to see it. I'll live to see these places disappear. It's going to be, you know, like they said, by the end of this century, the face of the world will have changed considerably. And it isn't just going to be, you know, like I said, the United States. It's going to be, you know, China and the Philippines and, you know, parts of England and all that. All these areas here that are really close, you know, to sea level. They're all going to be like Venice, Italy. There, I mean, it's just going to be underwater practically. New York City, I mean, Christ. Nobody really thinks too much about New York City getting washed out, but it's you know, even if they build a seawall back, if they get a hurricane up through there, and they've had hurricanes go through there, you know, it's still going to cause trouble. I mean, look, every time they get, even just if they have a heavy rainfall, the subways flood. I don't know if you've ever seen videos of that on YouTube, but they show the water is they're waist deep in water in the fucking subways when it's just raining hard. Okay, so that goes to show you they don't have a way to drain the water out because they're too low next to the sea level. Okay, they can't pump it out. So, and I think, you know, that's probably one reason why the rats are everywhere down there, is because, you know, that place is always submerged in dirty water all the time when it rains and stuff. And, you know, what do you think draws that in? You know, what's going to draw it? You know, so it's really, you know, already New York is, you know, when was that last hurricane they had there? Did some damage. Christ, I mean, it was just, I can't remember the name of it now. It was like maybe 2 years ago, but, yeah, I mean, Christ, New York is looks like Miami, you know, I think, and when they get a hurricane there. So, yeah, I mean, at one time it was interesting to have property next to the ocean. Today, it's a bad idea. It's just a bad idea. And you're going to see the housing market really go unstable. And probably not too long from now, especially in those areas that Maya showed you on the map that are going to be affected by incoming, you know, waters and stuff like that, flood waters and stuff. People aren't going to buy to live down there. They're just going to stay the hell out of it. And like, not that I can't blame people. I mean, nobody wants to buy, you know, a very expensive house and then watch it get sailed out to sea, you know, or kicked off its stilts or whatever. You know, nobody wants to see that. Christ, I mean, that's a lot of money. And insurance companies don't want to insure people that live in those areas because they know it's a loss for them right off the bat. So, I mean, you're looking at an area of the country that's going to be as worthless as the desert, you know, and it's not going to have any value to people because no one's going to want to live there. So Florida is going to be like, you know, what do you call it? I mean, you know, it's a state that's not going to have any matter at all because no one's going to want to live in it. And coastal areas and East Coast and stuff like that, New York, you know, or something, the same. A lot of those areas, the property will be zero. And, you know, people, if they haven't left those areas, will lose the the value of their home, you know, and God, you know, I just, I hope people and the banks and all that are preparing themselves for that eventuality, because those days are coming where our economy is going to be hit by the fallout from global warming, weather disasters, and you know, and just, you know, even the rest of the world, they're all going to have to brace themselves for that. It's coming, you know. This stuff's coming. And right now, the first sign is these big storms that show up now and cause huge amounts of damage in the billions of dollars. That, like in the last video, FEMA is bitching that they need more money because they're draining into it, they're dipping into it pretty heavily already. And it's supposed to last till, what, a year? Next year? So, or no, I mean, a year from now. It's that, I mean, they don't get more money into it for, you know, for months and months. But they need that, they need funds put into it now. And the Republicans are saying, oh, no, we're going to take a break, and we ain't going to come back, deal with that till after the election, okay? You know, so they don't see they don't get the point of why we need to be ahead of the ball on these things. Instead, they want to keep us, you know, behind it, I guess. I don't know. Republicans can't govern. They never could. In my lifetime, I never saw Republicans ever come up with anything good for people in this country or try to help anybody. So they're behaving true to form. Even if Trump wasn't in the picture, they'd still be doing what they're doing, because that's what they are. You know, short-sighted, selfish, you know, mean-spirited when you consider what they support, especially against women. You know, and it's sad that we are inundated with this kind of thinking in our government, because we all want our government to work for us. But if people in government don't want the government to work for anybody but themselves and the rich, then that's not a government that's going to help us when we're faced with climate change and the disasters that are going to be coming from that. And we want our government to be strong and ready for those days when they come, because it's going to matter at the end of the day how long this country will last in the face of, you know, people being, you know, forcibly evacuated to different places as they lose everything they own. It's, you know, it's going to look terrible to think that, you know, if we have somebody in the White House who's really not that good at governing, being around during those times. I mean, God help us. All right, so anyway, that's it for today. Hope everybody has a great rest of the week. So subscribe, comment, share, and keep your ears open for any health matters, and treat each other kind out there. And I will talk to you later. Take care.